Titan's End, A Galactic Odyssey. Chapter 1, The Repair. The year 4589 found humanity scattered across the solar system like seeds on cosmic wind. Robert Chen adjusted his environmental suit's pressure regulator and gazed across Titan's methane-shrouded landscape. The orange haze that perpetually enveloped Saturn's largest moon created an otherworldly tableau that never failed to inspire him, even after 3 years stationed at Research Outpost Huygens. Control, this is Chen. Beginning exterior hull repairs on Section C7, Robert spoke into his helmet comm, his breath forming brief clouds against the faceplate in the frigid -179-degree atmosphere. Copy that, Chen. Weather sensors are picking up increased particulate activity in your sector. Keep it tight out there, came the crackling response from Mission Control back on Earth, the signal delayed by nearly 2 hours due to the vast distance. Robert smiled grimly. By the time they received any distress signal, he'd either be safe or dead. Such was the reality of deep space operations. He activated his magnetic boots and began his careful traverse across the station's outer hull, his toolkit floating beside him in the low gravity. The research station had been humanity's furthest permanent outpost for over 2 decades, studying Titan's unique hydrocarbon lakes and potential for harboring life. Robert had volunteered for the assignment after completing his doctorate in xenobiology, drawn by the promise of discovering something unprecedented in the cosmos. As he worked, replacing corroded seals and reinforcing structural joints, Robert's mind wandered to the reports he'd been filing. Strange electromagnetic readings had been increasing over the past month, emanating from somewhere beyond Saturn's orbit. The patterns defied conventional explanation, almost as if they were intentional. Probably just solar interference, he muttered, securing another bolt. The station's hull gleamed dully in Saturn's reflected light, its massive ring system casting ethereal shadows across Titan's surface. The work was methodical, requiring precise attention to detail. Each seal had to be perfect, each joint properly torqued. One mistake in this environment meant certain death. Robert had performed these repairs dozens of times, but he never allowed himself to become complacent. As he rounded the station's communication array, Robert paused. Something was wrong. The usual background hum of Saturn's magnetic field seemed different. More intense. He checked his instruments, but everything appeared normal. Control, are you detecting any unusual electromagnetic activity in our sector? He asked. The response came back garbled, filled with static. Chen, readings, unable to check your. Robert frowned. Communication blackouts weren't uncommon, but the timing seemed odd. He decided to expedite his repairs and return to the station's interior. Something about the vast emptiness of space suddenly felt less empty than usual. Working with renewed urgency, Robert completed the whole repairs in record time. As he prepared to return to the airlock, he noticed a faint glimmer in the distance. At first, he thought it might be another of Saturn's smaller moons, but the movement was wrong. Too fast. Too purposeful. What the hell? Robert whispered, enhancing his helmet's optical zoom. The glimmer resolved into multiple objects, moving in formation toward the station. As they approached, Robert realized with growing horror that they weren't natural celestial bodies. They were asteroids, but their trajectory was impossible. Nothing in the solar system could explain their speed or direction. Control. Control, this is an emergency. We have incoming objects, repeat, incoming objects. Robert shouted into his comm, but received only static in response. The asteroids were accelerating, defying every law of physics Robert understood. Whatever was propelling them operated on principles beyond human comprehension. He had perhaps 3 minutes before impact. Robert abandoned his tools and sprinted toward the airlock, his magnetic boots sending metallic clangs through the station's superstructure. Behind him, the first asteroid struck the station's solar array with devastating force, sending fragments spinning into Titan's atmosphere. The station shuddered, its hull groaning under the assault. Robert dove through the airlock just as the second impact hit, this one striking the main laboratory module. Emergency klaxons wailed as the station's structural integrity began to fail. Computer, seal all interior bulkheads. Emergency Protocol Omega. Robert commanded as he cycled through the airlock. The station's AI responded with mechanical precision. Hull breach detected in sectors C7, D9, and A3. Initiating emergency evacuation procedures. Estimated time to catastrophic failure, 90 seconds. Robert's heart raced as he rushed to the emergency escape pods. The station lurched violently as another asteroid found its mark, and he could hear the terrifying sound of atmosphere venting into space. Through the observation windows, he could see more asteroids approaching, their surfaces glowing with an eerie energy that seemed almost alive. "This isn't natural," Robert gasped as he reached the pod bay. "Something's controlling them." The escape pod systems activated automatically as he sealed himself inside. Through the small porthole, Robert watched in fascination and terror as the asteroids continued their relentless assault. Each impact was precisely calculated, targeting critical systems with surgical accuracy. As the pod's engines ignited, carrying him away from the dying station, Robert caught a glimpse of something that made his blood freeze. The asteroids weren't just destroying the station, they were positioning themselves around it, forming a perfect geometric pattern that pulsed with that same otherworldly energy. "Someone's out there," Robert whispered as his pod tumbled through space. "Someone who doesn't want us here." The research outpost Huygens collapsed in on itself, its death throes illuminated by Saturn's ring-scattered light. Robert was alone in the cosmos, with only his pod's limited life support standing between him and the infinite cold of space. But as he watched the station's final moments, Robert realized his ordeal was just beginning. The pod's trajectory was carrying him not toward safety, but directly into Saturn's massive gravitational field. The same force that had held him in orbit around Titan was now pulling him inexorably toward the gas giant's crushing embrace. "Computer, plot escape trajectory," Robert commanded, but the pod's response was grim. "Unable to achieve escape velocity. Current trajectory intersects with Saturn's upper atmosphere in 4 hours, 17 minutes. Robert stared at the massive planet growing larger in his viewport. Saturn's swirling storms and banded atmosphere held a deadly beauty that would soon claim his life. The pod's heat shield was designed for atmospheric entry on smaller worlds, not the crushing pressure and temperature of a gas giant. As he began to accept his fate, Robert noticed something else in the distance. The asteroids that had destroyed his station were moving again, but this time they were heading away from Saturn entirely, disappearing into the dark between worlds with the same impossible speed that had brought them. "What are you?" Robert asked the empty space. "And why did you do this?" The questions would haunt him for the remaining hours of his life, assuming he lived that long. But as Robert drifted toward his doom, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the end of his story, but merely the beginning of something far more extraordinary. Chapter 2, The Fall. Robert's escape pod tumbled through space like a leaf in a hurricane, caught in Saturn's inexorable gravitational embrace. The massive planet filled his viewport now, its bands of clouds swirling in hypnotic patterns that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. He had never seen Saturn from this perspective, as a dying man watching his executioner approach. "Pod systems nominal," the computer announced with maddening calm. "Atmospheric entry in 3 hours, 42 minutes. Robert laughed bitterly. Nominal. As if there was anything normal about his situation. He'd survived the destruction of humanity's most remote outpost, only to face certain death in the crushing depths of a gas giant. The irony was not lost on him that he, a xenobiologist who had spent his life searching for signs of life in the universe, would die alone in the most lifeless place imaginable. He tried to maintain his scientific objectivity, recording his observations for whatever purpose they might serve. Personal log, Robert Chen, research specialist, Huygens Station. The asteroid attack was definitely artificial in nature. The precision of the strikes, the impossible trajectories, the coordinated timing, none of it can be explained by natural phenomena. As he spoke, Robert's mind raced through the possibilities. Humanity had never encountered alien intelligence, despite centuries of searching. Radio telescopes had detected no signals, space probes had found no artifacts, and the galaxy seemed depressingly empty of sentient life. Yet the destruction of his station suggested otherwise. The asteroids moved under their own power, he continued, studying the sensor data he'd managed to download before evacuation. Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. If this is first contact, it's not the peaceful encounter we always hoped for. The pod's environmental systems hummed quietly around him, recycling his air and maintaining a comfortable temperature. Such sophisticated technology, yet completely helpless against the fundamental forces of the universe. Robert found himself thinking of the engineers who had designed this pod, probably never imagining it would become someone's tomb. 3 hours, 12 minutes to atmospheric entry, the computer updated. Robert wondered if anyone would ever know what had happened to Huygens Station. The destruction had been so complete, so thorough, that there might not be enough debris left to investigate. Humanity would simply lose contact with their furthest outpost, and Robert Chin would be listed as missing, presumed dead. He thought of his sister Maya back on Earth, probably working in her garden without any idea that her brother was about to become part of Saturn's atmosphere. Their parents were gone, lost in the Mars colony disaster of 4571, leaving only Maya and Robert to carry on the family name. Now that name would die with him. You know what? Robert said aloud, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. I'm not going quietly. If there's anyone out there listening, I want you to know that humanity was here. We existed. We reached for the stars, and we found something that didn't want us to find it. He began transmitting a broad-spectrum message, pouring all of the pod's remaining power into the signal. It was a futile gesture. The message would take hours to reach anywhere significant, and the pod would be destroyed long before any reply could arrive. But it felt important to try. This is Robert Chin of the Terran Colonial Authority. Our research station on Titan has been destroyed by an unknown force using weaponized asteroids. The attack was coordinated and deliberate. If you receive this message, know that we did not go quietly into the night. We were explorers, scientists, dreamers. We came in peace, and we died in wonder. As he transmitted his message, Robert noticed something unusual in the pod's sensor readings. The electromagnetic signature that had been plaguing Titan for weeks was getting stronger, not weaker. Whatever had destroyed his station was still out there, and it was following him. 2 hours, 48 minutes to atmospheric entry. Robert closed his eyes and tried to imagine what his death would be like. The pod would hit Saturn's upper atmosphere at tremendous speed, generating heat that would vaporize the hull in seconds. He would have just enough time to feel the increasing pressure before consciousness left him forever. At least it would be quick. But as he contemplated his fate, Robert's scientific mind refused to stop working. The energy signatures he detected were unlike anything in human experience, yet they followed certain patterns. The asteroids had moved with purpose, suggesting intelligence behind their control. The electromagnetic readings implied technology far beyond human capability. Computer, analyze the energy signatures from the asteroid attack. Compare them to known phenomena. Analysis complete. Energy signatures do not match any recorded natural or artificial phenomena. Recommending classification as unknown alien technology. Robert's heart skipped. UAT, the classification every xenobiologist dreamed of encountering. He was witnessing humanity's first contact with alien intelligence, and it was trying to kill him. Well, he said to the emptiness around him, at least I'll die having made the discovery of the millennium. Saturn's gravity was accelerating his pod now, pulling him toward the planet's roiling atmosphere. Through the viewport, Robert could see the intricate structure of the ring system, billions of ice particles and rocky debris caught in their eternal dance around the gas giant. Soon, his pod would join that debris, another speck of matter in Saturn's gravitational domain. 2 hours, 15 minutes to atmospheric entry. Robert found himself thinking about the nature of exploration. Every great discovery in human history had been accompanied by risk, by the possibility of death in service of knowledge. The first humans to cross oceans, to climb mountains, To venture into space, they had all faced the same fundamental question: was knowledge worth dying for? As Saturn's upper atmosphere began to exert its influence on his pod, causing slight vibrations in the hull, Robert realized he had his answer. The knowledge that alien intelligence existed, that humanity was not alone in the universe, was worth any price. Even if he died without being able to share that knowledge, the universe itself would know that two forms of life had briefly touched. 1 hour, 37 minutes to atmospheric entry. The pod's systems were beginning to strain against Saturn's gravitational field. Warning lights flickered on the control panel, and Robert could hear the hull creaking under the increasing stress. This was it, the final approach to his destiny. But as he prepared for the inevitable, Robert noticed something impossible. The electromagnetic readings were spiking again, but this time they were coming from directly ahead of him. Something was forming in the space between his pod and Saturn's atmosphere, something that made the very fabric of space-time ripple with energy. "What the hell?" Robert whispered, staring at his instruments in disbelief. The energy buildup was massive, far beyond anything he'd detected during the asteroid attack. Space itself seemed to be tearing open, revealing something that shouldn't exist. As Robert watched in fascination and terror, a swirling vortex of light and energy materialized directly in his pod's path. "Computer, what am I looking at?" Unable to classify phenomenon. Energy readings beyond sensor capability. Recommend immediate course correction. But there was no way to change course. The pod was committed to its trajectory, and the mysterious vortex was growing larger by the second. As Robert tumbled toward the impossible anomaly, he realized that his fate was no longer in Saturn's hands. 30 seconds to contact with unknown phenomenon, the computer announced. Robert gripped his seat's armrests and tried to prepare for whatever was about to happen. The vortex filled his viewport now, its swirling patterns of light and energy creating a mesmerizing display that seemed to reach into his very soul. He could feel the pod systems going haywire as they encountered forces beyond their design parameters. 10 seconds to contact. Robert closed his eyes and thought of Maya, of his parents, of all the humans scattered across the solar system who had no idea that their universe was about to become a much stranger place. 5 seconds. The pod struck the vortex, and reality exploded into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors and sensations. Robert felt himself being pulled apart and reconstructed, his consciousness scattered across dimensions he couldn't comprehend. Time became fluid, space became malleable, and for a moment that lasted forever, Robert Chin existed everywhere and nowhere at once. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos ended. The pod system stabilized, the impossible energies faded, and Robert found himself staring at a viewport filled not with Saturn's deadly atmosphere, but with the brilliant blue-green surface of an unknown world. "Where am I?" he whispered, but the computer had no answer. Robert had escaped Saturn's embrace, but he had also left behind everything he had ever known. Below him lay a planet that shouldn't exist, and a solar system that bore no resemblance to his own. He was further from home than any human had ever been, and he was about to discover that his greatest adventure was just beginning. Chapter 3, New World. Robert's escape pod descended through the atmosphere of an alien world, its heat shield glowing cherry red as it carved a fiery path through skies the color of amethyst. The planet below was a tapestry of impossible colors, oceans that shimmered with silver light, continents painted in shades of violet and gold, and cloud formations that seemed to move with purposeful intent. Atmospheric composition, nitrogen-oxygen mix with trace noble gases, the pod's computer announced. Gravity, 0.89 Earth standard. Surface temperature, 18 degrees Celsius. Preliminary assessment, habitable. Robert stared at the readings in disbelief. After tumbling through a cosmic anomaly that defied every law of physics he knew, he had somehow arrived at a world that could sustain human life. The odds were astronomical, literally impossible. Yet here he was, about to land on a planet that might as well have been custom-built for his survival. The pod's descent systems engaged automatically, deploying atmospheric brakes and navigation thrusters. Through the viewport, Robert could see the surface rushing up to meet him, a landscape of rolling hills covered in what appeared to be vegetation, though the plants were colors he'd never seen in nature. Silverleaf trees swayed in the wind, their branches adorned with flowers that glowed with soft bioluminescence. "Touchdown in 60 seconds, the computer announced. Robert braced himself for impact, but the pod's landing systems performed flawlessly, setting him down in a clearing surrounded by the alien forest. The engine sounds faded, leaving only the gentle hiss of atmospheric pressure equalizing between the pod's interior and the world outside. Landing complete. Exterior environment confirmed safe for human habitation. Recommend full environmental scan before egress." But Robert was already reaching for his helmet releases. The readings showed breathable air, comfortable temperature, and no immediate threats. After hours of facing certain death, the promise of solid ground beneath his feet was irresistible. The pod's hatch opened with a soft pneumatic hiss, and Robert stepped onto the surface of an alien world. The gravity felt almost exactly like Earth's, allowing him to walk with confidence. The air was clean and sweet, carrying scents that were familiar yet strange, something like pine mixed with honey and ozone. "Incredible," Robert whispered, kneeling to touch the ground. The soil was dark and rich, teeming with microscopic life that his trained eye could detect even without instruments. This wasn't just a habitable world, it was a thriving ecosystem. The vegetation around him was unlike anything in Earth's fossil record. The silverleaf trees stood 30 meters tall, their trunks smooth and metallic in appearance. Between them grew bushes with leaves that shifted color as Robert watched, cycling through spectrums of blue and green and purple. The flowers were the most remarkable feature, they pulsed with soft light, creating a gentle illumination that made the forest seem magical. As Robert explored the immediate area around his pod, he began to notice details that suggested this world was far from uninhabited. The trees grew in patterns too regular to be natural, and the ground showed signs of cultivation. Someone, or something, was tending this forest. "Computer, run a full sensor sweep of the area. Look for signs of intelligent life." The pod's sensors hummed to life, painting a three-dimensional map of the surrounding terrain. The results were startling. The forest was laced with artificial structures, hidden beneath the canopy but clearly visible to electromagnetic analysis. Roads, buildings, and what appeared to be technological installations spread for kilometers in every direction. "Multiple artificial structures detected," the computer confirmed. "Recommend extreme caution. This area is inhabited." Robert's excitement warred with apprehension. First contact with alien intelligence was the dream of every xenobiologist, but the destruction of Huygens Station proved that not all aliens were friendly. He needed to proceed carefully, gather information before revealing himself. As he stood in the clearing, debating his next move, Robert became aware of a sound in the distance, a low, rhythmic thrumming that seemed to come from the forest itself. The bioluminescent flowers began to pulse in synchronization with the sound, creating a light show that rippled through the trees like a visual symphony. "That's definitely artificial," Robert murmured, recognizing the pattern as too complex and regular to be natural. The sound was growing closer, and Robert realized with growing concern that he was being approached. His pod's landing had undoubtedly been detected by whatever intelligence inhabited this world. The question was whether they would be curious or hostile. Robert retreated to his pod and armed himself with the emergency survival kit's plasma cutter. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it might buy him time to escape if necessary. As he waited, the thrumming sound grew louder, and the forest's light display became more intense. Then, through the trees, Robert saw them. The first beings to emerge from the forest were humanoid in general shape but clearly not human. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to be made of living metal. Their faces were angular and aristocratic, with large eyes that glowed with the same soft light as the forest flowers. They wore flowing robes that seemed to be woven from strands of pure energy, shifting and changing color as they moved. Behind them came a second group of beings, shorter and more compact, but no less alien. These creatures had 4 arms and skin that appeared to be made of living crystal, refracting light into rainbow patterns. Their faces were insectoid, with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked softly as they communicated. Robert's heart pounded as he realized he was witnessing not just first contact, but contact with multiple alien species. The two groups moved together but maintained clear separation, suggesting some kind of alliance or partnership. The tall, metallic beings, Robert mentally dubbed them Illuminati, approached his pod first. Their leader, distinguished by robes of deeper blue and more intricate patterns, raised one hand in what appeared to be a universal gesture of greeting. "Welcome, traveler from the void," the being said, and Robert nearly fell over in shock. The words were spoken in perfect English, with only a slight musical quality that made them sound like a song. You speak my language?" Robert managed, stepping forward cautiously. "We speak the language of your thoughts," the Luminari replied. "Your mind broadcasts its patterns clearly. You are called Robert Chen, and you come from a world of blue skies and yellow sun, many light years distant." Robert's scientific mind reeled at the implications. Telepathic communication, instantaneous language translation, and the ability to read complex thoughts and memories, these beings possessed technologies that made human science look primitive. "How is that possible?" Robert asked. "All consciousness shares common patterns," the being explained. "We have learned to read these patterns, to understand the thoughts and feelings of other minds. It is how we maintain peace between our peoples." The crystal-skinned beings, Robert decided to call them the crystalline, clicked their mandibles in what might have been laughter. Their leader, a being whose crystal skin showed deep veins of gold, stepped forward. "Peace is a relative term, mind reader," the crystalline leader said, its voice carrying a buzzing undertone that made Robert's teeth ache. "We are allied, yes, but not in peace. We are at war." "War?" Robert asked. "With whom?" The Luminari leader's expression darkened, its glowing eyes dimming. "With the Devourers. The ones who consume worlds and leave nothing but empty space behind. They have found our system, and they come to claim it as they have claimed so many others." Robert felt a chill run down his spine. "The asteroid attack on my station, was that them?" "Most likely," the crystalline leader confirmed. "They probed the defenses of new systems, testing the strength of those who would oppose them. Your station was a sentry post, and they eliminated it to prevent warning of their approach." "Then they're coming here too?" "They are already here," the Luminari leader said grimly. "The first wave arrived 3 planetary rotations ago. We have been preparing for their assault, but our forces are limited. We had not expected assistance from the void." Robert realized they were talking about him. "You want me to help you fight them?" "You have seen their power," the crystalline leader said. "You have survived their attack. You have knowledge of their methods that could prove valuable to our defense." Robert looked at the 2 alien leaders, representatives of species that had probably never seen a human before, asking him to join their war against the same force that had destroyed his station. The irony was overwhelming. "What makes you think I can help?" "I'm just one person, and I'm not even a soldier." "You are a survivor," the Luminari leader replied. "And you are here, in this place, at this time, when all the patterns of fate converge. This is not coincidence, Robert Chen. This is destiny." As if to emphasize the point, the forest around them suddenly erupted in brilliant light. The bioluminescent flowers blazed like stars, and the trees themselves began to glow with energy. In the distance, Robert could hear the sound of thunder, but it wasn't coming from the sky, it was coming from space. "They come," the crystalline leader said, its golden veins pulsing with urgent light. "The second wave begins. Will you stand with us, human, or will you face the Devourers alone?" Robert looked up at the sky, where streaks of fire were beginning to appear among the stars. Somewhere up there, another human outpost was probably being destroyed, another scientist was probably dying alone in the void. The Devourers were methodical, patient, and utterly ruthless in their conquest. But here, on this impossible world, he had found allies. Beings who understood the threat and were willing to fight back. The choice was clear. "I'll stand with you," Robert said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "Let's give these Devourers something to think about." The Luminari leader smiled, its metallic features shifting into an expression of genuine warmth. Then let the war begin in earnest. We have much to show you, Robert Chen, and little time to prepare. As the first explosions lit the sky above them, Robert realized that his journey from human scientist to alien warrior had officially begun. The boy who had once dreamed of discovering life among the stars had found it, and now he would fight to preserve it. Chapter 4: The Alliance. The underground command center of the Luminari Crystalline Alliance was a marvel of alien engineering that left Robert speechless. Carved from living rock and illuminated by the natural phosphorescence of both species, the cavern extended for kilometers beneath the surface of the planet. Holographic displays showed tactical information in 3 dimensions, while the air hummed with the energy of alien technology. Impressive, Robert said, following his escorts through corridors lined with what appeared to be living metal. The walls pulsed with soft light, and he could swear he heard them breathing. Our civilizations have been allies for over 1,000 of your years, explained Veltar, the Luminari leader who had first greeted him. When the Devourer's threat became known, we combined our technologies to create this fortress. It has served us well in the preliminary skirmishes. Kreshka, the crystalline commander, clicked her mandibles in what Robert was learning to recognize as agreement. The Luminari provide the organic technology, living systems that can adapt and repair themselves. We provide the crystalline matrices that focus and amplify energy. Together, we are stronger than either species alone. As they walked, Robert observed the fascinating integration of the 2 alien technologies. Luminari biosystems pulsed with life, growing and changing to meet the needs of the moment. Crystalline structures channeled that energy into precise, focused applications. The result was a synthesis that seemed almost magical to human eyes. Here, Veltar said, stopping before a massive circular chamber. The war room. Here we coordinate our defense against the Devourers. The chamber was dominated by a holographic display showing the entire solar system in perfect detail. The planet they were on, which his hosts called Zephyria, orbited a binary star system, sharing space with 6 other worlds. The display showed the current positions of all major bodies, as well as the locations of the Devourer fleet. Robert studied the tactical situation with growing unease. The Devourer forces were massive, hundreds of ships arranged in precise formations, moving with mechanical precision toward the inhabited worlds. Their technology appeared to be based on dark matter manipulation, allowing them to create and control gravitational fields at will. They're not just invading, Robert realized. They're harvesting the entire system. Correct, Kreshka confirmed. The Devourers do not merely conquer, they consume. They strip worlds of all matter and energy, leaving nothing but empty space. Our intelligence suggests they have consumed over 40 systems in this galaxy alone. 40 systems, Robert repeated, trying to comprehend the scale of destruction. That's billions of lives. Trillions, Veltar corrected grimly. The Devourers are not just a military threat, they are an extinction event. They represent the end of all life in their path. The strategic display updated, showing new Devourer formations moving into position around Zephyria's outer system. Robert watched the enemy ships maneuver with perfect coordination, like a swarm of mechanical insects following predetermined programming. What's their ultimate goal? Robert asked. What do they do with all the matter and energy they consume? We do not know, Kreshka admitted. Our attempts to communicate with them have failed. They do not negotiate, they do not explain, they do not show mercy. They simply consume and move on to the next target. Robert studied the enemy fleet movements, his scientific mind working to identify patterns. The Devourers weren't just randomly destructive, they were following a specific methodology. Their attacks were carefully planned, their resource allocation precise, their timing perfect. They're not mindless, Robert said. This is systematic, methodical. They're following some kind of plan. Yes, Veltar agreed. But what plan? For what purpose? These questions have haunted us since the first Devourer scouts appeared in our system. Show me their previous attacks, Robert requested. I want to see how they operate. The holographic display shifted, showing recordings of previous Devourer assaults on other worlds. Robert watched in fascination and horror as the alien fleet methodically dismantled entire civilizations. Their ships were massive, angular constructs that seemed to bend space around them. Their weapons were unlike anything in human experience, beams of pure entropy that unraveled matter at the molecular level. But what struck Robert most was the precision of their operations. The Devourers wasted nothing, destroyed nothing unnecessarily. Every attack was calculated to achieve maximum efficiency with minimum energy expenditure. They're not warriors, Robert realized. They're processors. They're treating entire civilizations like raw materials to be refined. Refined into what? Kreshka asked. I don't know, Robert admitted. But the pattern is clear. They're not just conquering, they're transforming. Converting matter and energy into something else entirely. The implications were staggering. If the Devourers weren't just destroying civilizations but converting them into something else, then their threat extended beyond simple extinction. They were rewriting the fundamental nature of matter itself. We need to capture one of their ships, Robert said. Study their technology, understand their methods. Fighting them blindly won't work, we need to understand what we're up against. Veltar's metallic features shifted into what might have been a smile. You think like a warrior, Robert Chen. We have attempted such captures before, but their ships are protected by quantum shielding that our weapons cannot penetrate. Then we need to think differently, Robert said, studying the tactical display. Every system has weaknesses. We just need to find theirs. As if summoned by his words, the chamber's emergency klaxons began to wail. The holographic display updated to show new Devourer activity, a massive fleet formation accelerating towards Zephyria itself. The final assault begins, Kreshka announced, her crystal skin flaring with urgent light. All forces to battle stations. The chamber erupted into controlled chaos as alien commanders rushed to their positions. Robert watched the coordinated response with admiration. Despite being different species, the Luminari and Crystalline worked together with remarkable efficiency. Robert, Veltar said, turning to him as the activity swirled around them. Will you fight with us? Your knowledge of Devourer tactics could be valuable. Robert looked at the tactical display, where thousands of Devourer ships were converging on Zephyria like a dark tide. Somewhere in that fleet were the same beings who had destroyed his station, killed his colleagues, and tried to murder him in the depths of space. I'll fight, Robert said. But I want to do more than just shoot at them. I want to understand them. If we can figure out what they're really after, we might be able to stop them. Agreed, Kreshka said. But first, we must survive their assault. The battle for Zephyria is about to begin. As Robert prepared to join his first alien war, he couldn't help but think about the incredible journey that had brought him here. Less than 24 hours ago, he had been a research scientist studying microbes on Titan. Now he was a strategic advisor in a battle for the survival of multiple civilizations. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. But as the first Devourer ships entered Zephyria's atmosphere, trailing fire and destruction, Robert pushed aside his philosophical musings and focused on the task at hand. The time for wonder had passed. Now was the time for war. The alliance between human, Luminari, and Crystalline was about to face its ultimate test. Robert only hoped they were strong enough to survive what was coming.